I love horror. The genre as a whole is something that really interests me. I've played horror games on this channel in the past, but one thing I've never really touched on is horror films. You see, I really enjoy horror films, but I don't get to watch them that often. See, while I love horror films, my girlfriend doesn't. And we have a 5-year-old who we don't want to traumatize, so we don't get to watch horror that often. But in the spirit of the Halloween season, we decided to watch some horror films. And one that I missed out on when it very first came out and has been held as the scariest movie of all time is Sinister. When Sinister first came out, I really wanted to see it, but I just never got the chance to. Although I've always really wanted to watch it, I just never took the time to actually sit down and watch it. A few years ago, there was a test done with heart rate monitors to determine which was the scariest movie of all time, and according to science, Sinister was the scariest movie of all time.
New details today in the grisly murders of a local family found earlier this week.
Until this year, and they determined that the scariest movie of all time was actually Host, which is another movie that I made my girlfriend watch. Now, is Host really scarier than Sinister? So one thing I really liked about Host was the unique approach that they took to found footage horror, making the whole movie around Zoom and set around the whole quarantine era. I thought all that was really unique and worked pretty well. But I think it also ages it. Setting your horror film around such a specific time period and such a historical moment, and having something such as Zoom, which played such a big part during that time for any students that were going to school and people that had to work from home, it ages the film because it sets a time to that film, which sometimes that works if that's the point of the film, is to make it a period piece. But I don't think a quarantine period piece is really what they were going for.
What was that? Amy, was that you?
I heard it. I heard something.
I think there's something here. Do you see that?
I think watching Host in 2022 isn't as bad as if you were to watch Host in 2030, and then you kind of have that, remember that? But on the other hand, you can watch Sinister at any point in time and it still feels fresh. It doesn't feel like it's aged all that poorly, aside from a couple of nitpicky things, such as the jump scare at the very end. Now, I will say one thing that both of these films do really well is making you feel uncomfortable throughout the whole thing. You see, Sinister has this overarching mystery to it, and you're trying to follow the character and figure out what's going on with them, while in Host, you're just kind of watching things happen. And while there is some paranormal stuff that happens, it's not really a mystery because you kind of get what's going on just by watching it. Now, one thing that I have to give to Sinister is that there are a lot more memorable moments in it, such as the lawnmower scene. Even though I just watched Host not that long ago, I still feel like there's a lot of stuff that I've kind of forgotten, or nothing really stuck with me as hard as with Sinister. Now, the thing about horror is that it's all subjective. To me, I believe Sinister is a lot scarier than Host, regardless of what the statistics say. But to my girlfriend, she believes that Host was scarier than Sinister. But with that said, I don't even consider Sinister to be the scariest movie of all time, personally. For me, the scariest movie of all time is Hereditary. Now, I don't know if that's just because I watched Hereditary when I was alone, and I watched Sinister and Host when I was with my girlfriend, or if just the experience of Hereditary affected me different than Sinister or Host. Now, my opinion is a little bit skewed because, to me, jump scares aren't what make a good horror film. Jump scares can be used effectively, or they can just be kind of thrown in, and it's always really obvious when they're just thrown in, and you can almost count it down, just the feeling of it. I don't want to be like a horror snob that just doesn't like jump scares in general, but a lot of the times they kind of feel cheap. And that's one thing I have against Sinister, is that the jump scare at the end is pretty cheap. There are a couple of good ones during it, none come to mind right now, but I think overall Hereditary is just a more scary experience without the use of a bunch of jump scares. So is Sinister still the scariest movie of all time? You tell me, because I don't really know. To me, it never was, but that's just my opinion. If you made it this far and you're like me and you like movie, TV, and video game discussions, think about subscribing and watching more of my content. You'd be helping me out a lot and I'd really appreciate it. And that's all for now, so thanks.